hello and welcome to this video. My name is Elaine. If you have not been here before, this is a very exciting video for me to film. I have a lot of notes in front of me here, and I'm going to be ranking and talking about the 21 eyeshadow palettes that I bought in 2021. And some initial thoughts before I get started here. I am posting this 6 months into 2022. This has been on my to film list for a really long time. I had a unplanned 6 month break from filming YouTube videos, but I'm here today to talk about these eyeshadow palettes. It's a video I still really wanted to create and post and kind of talk about and analyze my purchasing decisions that I did have in 2021. So, like I said, there's exactly 21 eyeshadow palettes, which is just perfect. I'm so excited to rank these. And again, talking about those purchasing decisions. 2021 was a year that I was kind of finally getting to really understand what I like and appreciate in a palette. And as such, I made some really good palette purchasing decisions. Some history, I did really start getting into posting really regularly on indie makeup Instagram, that kind of community, towards the end of 2020. And I think all throughout 2021, I was hearing of more brands, but I was also having tangible evidence of what products I was using and what kind of looks I was creating, scrolling back through my Instagram feed. So it was kind of a year that I think means a lot for me in my purchasing and all of those things. I do still believe that adding 21 whole palettes to my collection is a lot for 1 year. In 2022, I am aiming to do a little bit fewer of palette purchases than 21. And so far I am on that track. I believe I've purchased 6 palettes, something like that. And I'm sure I'll have more videos where I talk about that. A lot of these palettes, kind of going back to when I said I made some really good palette purchasing decisions, especially the ones in my top 10. I think these are going to be palette staples in my collection for years to come. I'm absolutely sure of it, and I'll talk about why. For each palette spot, I'm going to talk a lot about what I think of the palette and what purpose it really is going to hold in my collection. And that being said, I am a total eyeshadow freak. I've thought a lot about these rankings. I've had 6 months to really think about it, and it has changed since I sat down and initially ranked these when I was going to film this video in January. So I find it still very interesting, and I hope you enjoy watching the video and hearing my thoughts. So starting at number 21, the last palette, this one was a really easy one to decide because I've actually already decluttered this palette. I'm going to put a picture up here. It's the Alter Ego Blooms palette. I bought this, probably one of the first palettes I bought in 2021, and I own another palette from Alter Ego called the Goddess palette, which is a dupe of the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and I really love that one. The shades are magnetic, the quality is really good there, but this one, the Blooms palette, it is a dupe for the Love palette by Natasha Denona, and the quality was not the same. The palette was not magnetic. There was just a lot of things about it that disappointed me because I liked the Goddess palette so much. So I actually decluttered this one. It was just kind of, a significant decrease since the Goddess palette I already owned. And it was really the only palette in this ranking that I was disappointed in enough to get rid of. And really I did so very quickly. So with that being said, I'll move into number 20, which is the Shroud Arcana palette. I'll try to show you the palettes as I'm talking about this. So again, this is number 20. The main reason that I'm going to say I don't regret buying this palette necessarily, but the main reason I don't use it is that it does run very dark for me, probably a little too dark for me, and it's kind of lacking some transition shades that would maybe make it a little bit more usable for me. The other part of this is the shimmers are kind of meh. They're not like super great shimmers. I am pretty convinced that if the shimmers were better and more like toppers and more like some of the formulas you're going to see higher up in my ranking, that I would use this a lot more. I mean, there are some really pretty shades in here, but I just don't have, the identity for this palette in my brain yet, and I've barely used it, and that's why it's going to sit here at number 20. And kind of as a little aside, the next like 6 or 7 palettes, I don't regret buying them at all. It's just kind of like that one where for one reason or another, I'm using them a little less than some of the other palettes that are ranking towards the middle and then even higher. Number 19 is going to be the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights palette. This is a little 6-pan of really, really intense and foiled shimmers. I think this is maybe getting a little washed out with my lighting. I'll see if I can fix that in post, but I don't regret this one either, of course. It is super, super gorgeous. The formula and colors in here really are stunning, but my issue with it is that it's kind of a one trick pony. Um, all of the six shades have the exact same intensity. They're really gorgeous foil, but they're, all the same. So really, when I reach for this, I use one or two of the shades, and then of course I'm using mattes and I'm using other shimmers that might make the look a little bit more dynamic. But essentially, uh, you know, there's no formula variance and there's obviously no matte. So that's why this one's ranking a little lower, even though I do still love it. It's just not as versatile, and that's okay. That's just, the purpose that this palette serves is just kind of a companion palette. It is my lowest ranking all shimmer palette. We're going to talk about another one right now. But just because it's kind of, like I said, a one trick pony, that's why it falls there. Number 18 is the Sugar Drizzle Pizza Kitty palette. I do really like this. It is my only palette from Sugar Drizzle so far. It has some really, really stunning shades, and I enjoy that the shimmers have, varied nature. They're varied in texture, in wetness, in strength, and pigmentation, and that's good. But even though it has a varied nature, the quality varies a little bit too. Some of the shimmers are dry and dusty, and then some are a little bit more magical and moist. I'm going to use that word. The other reason this one's falling a little lower is I get significant staining with some of the shades. This blue purple space burger up here just completely turns my eyelids a different color. And that is so annoying and makes me really not want to use it. But overall, it's a decent palette. I wish I didn't pay full price for this because of the staining issues and the quality issues. But overall, I like it. I am interested in the brand. I'm just going to keep an eye on what maybe formulas are located in what palettes and kind of make my decisions based off that. So that was number 18. Number 17 is going to be the Profusion Emeralds palette. And this is a $5 palette. It's one of the most affordable palettes in my collection. I really like the color scheme here. And I really like, let me see if I can point them out to you. I really like really four of the shades in here. So this yellowy gold shimmer, the two greens, and then this matte more teal shade are absolutely stunning. They are super gorgeous, great quality. It's just that the other fours are just kind of meh for me. It's not like they're bad necessarily. They're just not, for one reason or another, either the color or the quality are not as top as like these three mattes and then the shimmer. So only really loving half the palette is the reason why it's number, what did I say? 17. Sorry, number 17. And the fact of the matter is I do have these colors that are, maybe slightly better and in slightly better setup palettes. But for something that's $5, I would absolutely recommend this. And I do really like the color scheme. So next is number 16, which is going to be ColourPop Orangey Glad. I bought this because I was feeling FOMO over the BH Orange Sorbet palette, Orange Sorbet ice cream shop palette. And I really only use this palette for this one shade, Sunkissed. It's super, super pretty. The lighter coral up here and kind of the deeper, stronger oranges down here are really nice too. But essentially, I only reach for this when I'm looking for an orange and not really any other time. It's monochromatic, so it serves that purpose really well, but it's kind of the only purpose that it has, and it's monochromatic. So it's just something that I reach for a little bit less. So that was number 16. Number 15 is going to be the Glam Shop Lugana palette. And let me just first say that the formula in here is absolutely stunning. This Atoll shade and even this, I'm not going to say it because it's Polish, but the Koralowick shade, they are sparkling, sheer, sparkly toppers that are so gorgeous. The reason this one's falling a little bit lower than my other Glam Shop palettes that are going to have a very similar formula and quality is that I wish there was, more mattes in here in general because there's really only the two here. And then I wish they had a warmer matte to go with these warmer shades. And then really the bottom two shimmers are not as impactful as the other ones. So I kind of just wish these were mattes and one was warmer to go with this. But like I said, the formula is really fantastic. If I were to make it my perfect palette, I would put a warmer matte to go with the warmer shimmers and it would be perfect. And again, this is Atoll, one of the most gorgeous shimmers I own. So I really, really like this. Just wish there was more mattes and more mattes that maybe made sense with the shimmer selection. Sorry, I'm getting so excited. I'm tripping over my words. Number 14 is also from Glam Shop. It's going to be the Violetti palette. This one is monochromatic as well, but what I really like is it has a little bit more variance in the tones of purple. So you have some warmer purples, some cooler purples. You have like some silvery purples and pinky purples, and then you also have this really interesting like um, golden pewter purple. I don't know. It's really pretty. Again, formula in here is going to be so stunning. It kind of scores some points over the Lugana as the mattes have a little bit more variety. You have some light, medium, dark. You have different colored mattes, and there's more mattes in this. But overall, it's still going to suffer from that. From being monochromatic, I'm going to reach for it a little bit less. Like if I'm in the mood for purple, oh, I'll reach for this. But if I'm in the mood for example, like if I'm in the mood for purple and red, I might reach for a palette that's going to have both, if that makes sense. So anyway, I overall just like this color story a little better. This does also have weaker shimmers in it, just like the Lugana. Like this one here is not like the others. And I think when that happens, I would like to see mattes instead. It would just make this a little bit more versatile and dynamic for me. And then next up is going to be number 13, my other Shroud palette, the It's Frickin' Bats, which was in collaboration with Butte Bean, who is now Batty Bean. This one is really gorgeous, and I waited a long time for it, but it kind of suffers from the same problems as the Arcana. I wish the shimmers were just a little stronger. I wish they were more like toppers. They're just a little thicker, which is totally fine. The color story in this is still gorgeous, and the shimmers are still pretty. And I thought I really liked this color story, but it turns out I kind of struggle with making varied looks. I tend to make a lot of the same looks when I use this, which is totally fine, but that's just why it's kind of ranking in the middle. I do have some formulation issues with the mattes. They tend to be different colors over different parts of my primer. So there will be inconsistent colors if there's like a wetter part of my primer in towards the crease versus a drier part of the primer that might be towards my brow bone. So I do have some issues with it adhering to my primer. So I rank this a little lower just due to the matte, really the formulation of both the mattes and the shimmers. But the color story really is gorgeous. And as a side special shout out to Batty Bean, I really like her content and what she does over on her channel. So I do still really like this. There's just, I think I need to get to know it a little bit better before I can completely decide. I'm not even halfway done, and I just had to take a water break because I've been talking so much, struggling to get through this video. But this kind of marks the point in which I'm moving into my more mid tier of palettes. The ones I've talked about to this point are a little bit more in the lower tier. They might have a couple of different reasons why I'm not reaching for them as much. But now going into the next, let me see, is it 6 or 7? The next 7 palettes are a little bit more mid tier, where I only have 1 or maybe 2 small issues with the palettes. So number 12 is the Sugar Pill Fun Size 2 palette. I impulse bought this because I love the original Fun Size palette so much that I bought this the minute it launched, because I was like, yes, I want to expand on that formula. I want to have more colors. It's just a tiny little perfect companion palette for some bright, impactful mattes. So bought this one right on launch. So I like it for the exact same reasons I bought it. I love the colors and the expansion of the original. I find these shades a little harder to pair together, like if I just grab this and want to use this. So I tend to use it more as a companion palette. If I'm working with another palette that, let's say I want a grungy green, I'll reach for that shade. If I want a pastel yellow, I'll reach for that. I kind of know what shades are in here, so I know when I want to reach for it. So it's just a little bit more of a companion palette, although I really do like it overall. I did find that the formulation of the matte shades in here can be a little weaker and a little thinner sometimes, especially the grind shade right here. It looks green in the pan, but it's a very grungy mustard yellow on your lid, or on my lid. And that's totally fine. It's just something I have learned about this palette as I use it a little bit more. Um, Overall, they're buildable and they're workable, but it's just they don't always look how they do in the pan. So this is a little bit more medium for me. Again, that was number 12. So number 11 is kind of the reason I fully decluttered the alter ego blooms. I did buy the Natasha Denona Love palette. This was always the color scheme of Natasha's that stuck out the most to me. And this one on 50% sale, so I scooped it up immediately. So I really, really love the matte formula in here. They're super easy to work with. There are a variety of tones and depths, a lot of good options in here. This palette also has an identity in my brain. I know there's pinks and purples and rich tones in here, as well as some lighter shades. I thought the shimmers in here were pretty weak. I would have liked them all to be like this middle purple one, which is called Pure Love. It's just a little bit more dynamic and more shimmery. I don't know if that's going to focus, so I'm just going to pretend it did and move on. Well, not even, okay, so not even Pure Love. It was Giving. Giving is the shade I was talking about. That's a little bit more sparkly and more intense. Not all of the shimmers in here are like that. So I wish there was a little bit more impact on the shimmers there. But that being said, I think the placement of this being at number 11 is exactly where it needs to be for me. It's not quite top 10 caliber, but it's pretty close. And if the shimmers had been higher, it totally would have deserved a spot at number 10. But I really like that it just worked out that it's number 11. So that's kind of exactly how I would describe it. Moving on to number 10, we're breaking into the top 10 now. The bottom 5 of my top 10 are kind of more that mid-tier. And then, of course, my top 5 are going to be like the best palettes in my collection, right? So we have another indie popping up here. This is a collab palette. This is the Copacetic Cosmetics Streamside palette, which was done in collaboration with Rocky Makeup, who is a account that I follow and interact with on Instagram pretty often. This palette, I really like the varying shades, depths, and the formulas in here. I like that this one has mattes and shimmers and flakies. Really like that. I love that there's, matte green and shimmer green. There are, there's a matte yellow and a shimmer yellow and all of that. I do wish there was a lighter green matte, like an olive color, and then maybe also a shimmery blue, but overall this is super curated. It has a beautiful color story and an awesome theme. This is themed after, I believe Lacey, who is Rocky Makeup, works in marine biology, no, aquatic ecosystems. Okay, so it was inspired by the diverse life in aquatic ecosystems. So the names in here are all related to that, and I really appreciate the inspiration and kind of how it's set up, and the color story is gorgeous, and I just really like it. It's number 10. Moving on into number 9 is going to be, I think this is the only BH Cosmetics palette I bought in 2021, but I did go on a buying spree for them in 2020. So it's a brand I really like their formula. So I wrote about this one in my notes here. The formula is stellar. I love the depth and the richness. This is a very deep palette, especially when you talk about the mattes. The shade selection itself is very nice, but I do wish there were some lighter, more colorful mattes to blend out these deeper shades. Really the only ones, you have these 2 shades are pretty much duplicates on my eye, and then this is the only colorful matte that you can use more as a transition. I just think that it's a pretty big palette to only have one colorful, lighter transition shade. I think they should have done a lighter pastel pink so that you could blend out some of these reds. Honestly, even a pastel orange or coral would have been really cool and dynamic too. And now that I say that, I wonder if I could pair this with a palette that has that shade, maybe even the coral shade in the Fun Sized 2 palette could be really fun with some of those darker reds and blues. But anyway, this was number 9. Let me pull my notes back up here. Like I said, I wish there could have been some lighter mattes. Overall, it's very close to perfect for me. If the shimmers were a little more impactful, not that they're bad, but if they were like tip-top shimmer formulas for me, this would be up way higher on my ranking. I'm going to talk about number 8 as well. So number 8 is another Copacetic Cosmetics palette. This is a companion palette in collaboration with M. Jones 5018. if you are active in the indie beauty community at all on Instagram, you probably know who Monica is. She does some amazing multi-chrome swatches. She supports a lot of indie brands over there. And this was, I think, one of her first forays into collaborating, if I'm correct. So Monica's collaborated with Copacetic to make this companion palette. I think this was released in 2020, so it's quite old, but it's designed after, or named the companion palette because it's designed to be a companion palette. And I also like that she dedicated it to her dog. I don't remember which name on the back was her dog's name, but that's okay. This is my middle ranking all shimmer palette, or my second highest shimmer only palette. It falls a little lower in the top 10 because a lot of the palettes I have are more versatile. I do love the shade selection here. I know that this palette contains pinks, purples, and greens, and the varying textures are super awesome. And I love that about this palette. I do have an easier time with some of the shades than others, but that's kind of just par for the course when you have varying textures like this. But overall, I do really like it. It's number 8 for my ranking, and move on from there. This is the last palette, kind of in my mid tier, and it comes from a brand you're going to find out that I really like. This is the Kaleidos Flower Punk palette. It's potentially my favorite color story that Kaleidos has done to date. It probably would be my number 1 palette if it weren't for its fatal flaw. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but overall, packaging absolutely stunning. Everything about this is a win except for this Earthship shade. I have some major adherence issues with this shade. It definitely prefers some primers over others. It does that thing I talked about with its freaking bats where it'll stick in some places where the primer might be a little bit more tacky, but then in other places where it's dried completely, it's annoying. Like I said, like I alluded to with the Shroud palette, you can use different primers to kind of mitigate those issues, but I would rather just not have those issues. So that's why this has slipped to number 7. This was a palette that was ranked a lot higher until I realized that Earthship shade doesn't work that well for me. And now it's slipped down to number 7, but it's still a really good palette. I love it a lot. Packaging is gorgeous. Artwork is gorgeous. Colors are stunning. Into the last segment of this palette, I'm going to rank my top 6. All of these palettes are really towards the top of my ranking. I love them for a lot of reasons, and I only have a short list of reasons why they're not maybe perfect. But if you want to take the time to comment down below what you think my top 3 eyeshadow palettes are, that would be really neat. If you care, if you don't care, that's totally fine. I will give you a hint. The eyeshadow look I'm wearing right now actually uses all 3 of them, although I do think you could get a very similar look with the palette that is in my number 3 spot. So if you at least want to guess that one, or if you want to guess my extended top 3, go right ahead. That'd be really interesting to read. But number 6 is going to be my Blend Bunny The Blends palette. This is a nearly perfect palette for me, although I do wish there were some lighter, brighter yellows and maybe a more yellowy mac and cheese type orange. And I probably didn't really need these mid-tone brown shades just because I have those in so many other palettes. I do get why there's a black and a white and maybe a dark brown, but I don't know if I necessarily needed these. But anyways, that's mostly just my preference. This is a little too big of a color story to be perfect for me. I do have a preference towards smaller, more curated color stories, and essentially this is kind of a companion palette for me. You know, the purpose that it serves in my collection is just when there's a matte shade I know that's in here that I need when I'm creating a different look with maybe a more curated color story, I will reach for this, but I do struggle with creating looks when I just pull out this palette. Like, let's say I decide I want to use this palette, I pull it out, I'm like, I don't know what to do. If I have a particular inspiration where a rainbow palette comes in handy, I will use it, obviously. And like I said, if I know I need, you know, a yellow that's not in a palette, then I will reach for this. But that's why I think that number 6 is a great spot for it. And I do really, really like the formula in here. If you're part of the indie makeup community on Instagram, you've heard of Blend Bunny, you've heard of Maggie. It's a really good formula, and I have purchased also the Surge palettes and the Dollhouse palettes in 2022, but I think just the size kind of puts me towards putting it at number 6. So moving into the top 5 now, my 5th palette is my last and most used Glam Shop palette that I have. This is the Camo palette. I freaking love this palette. This is my favorite monochromatic palette I own. There are varying tones in here, but there's lots of mattes. There's an amazing quality found in the shimmers here. These Glam Shop shimmers are just stunning. A lot of these are duochromatic in here, and then we've also got more sparkly marble shades in here. But they're so gorgeous. The formula of the mattes in here is very fragile and delicate. I would be afraid to travel with this, so I shoved it a little lower, number 5, but they do apply really well. They do have like dusty kick up, but they apply and they blend well. I like that this is neutral and colorful at the same time. It goes dark and it just has those stunning shimmers that I am looking for in my palettes. It's number 5. It's really amazing. Super affordable too. Talking about my number 3 palette here, we're going back into Kaleidos. This is nearly a perfect palette for me too. It's colorful and formulated really well. The shimmers are super sparkly. The mattes are formulated well. I do dislike the bulky packaging, and I do find that it has repeat shades. There's 2 coral oranges that are very similar, and then there's 2 shimmery greens that are also very similar. If one of the corals had been a periwinkle blue shimmer and one of the green shimmers had been matte, this would literally be my perfect palette. So I can use those shades out of my other palettes when I use this, and that is certainly what I do. But this is number 4, Kaleidos Escape Pod. One of my favorite palettes. I love it. Moving into number 3, so one of the palettes that I am wearing on my eyes today. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 are probably all very even. And like I said, if number 4, the Escape Pod, had those changes, it would definitely be number 1, way over these 3. But number 3 is going to be the Kaleidos Club Nebula. This was in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist, who is my number 1 YouTuber on this platform. Her content is just exactly what I'm looking for. Her looks are exactly what I try to do on my own face. So I do really like this. I'm using 3 shades from this palette today. I'm using Gravity, I'm using Void, and I'm using Astro, right? Yeah, Astro on my eyes today. Super, super gorgeous. Love the color story here. Let me pull up my notes so I'm sure to talk about everything I like. Amazing color story, perfect formulation of both the mattes and the sparkling shimmers. I like this color story and this quality so much that I forced myself to come up with 2 critiques. One, of course, being the bulky packaging. I already talked about that with Escape Pod. The other is the shade Gravity. Is really starting to piss me off lately. I wore it again today. It's not a matte. It's just not a matte. There's more and more shimmer that keeps coming out of it every time I use it. It applies weird, and it's hardly a matte at all anymore. If that were better, maybe it wouldn't piss me off so much and it wouldn't be number 3. But overall, color story and quality is really, really good. I can make stunning looks out of it, mostly due to those shimmers, and the really deep, dark mattes in here are just the reason that this is so, so good for me. And there's a lot of color variety in that palette as well. So number 2, this is another palette that is nearly perfect for me in every way. This is the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. I love this palette so, so much. I can't even tell you. The color story is very inspiring. It's dynamic. It's versatile. The formulas are really good. The shimmers are all really good except for this red one here at the bottom, Heat. It's different than the other 6 in this palette, so I don't really get why that's different. So that shade and the brown are kind of duds for me. I didn't need a brown in this color story. I don't know what I would have put in there instead necessarily. Maybe a warmer green shimmer that's a little lighter, like a lime green would have been nice. Well, we got that one, but it's more olive. Anyways, this is, with those 2 duds, that's the only reason that this little baby is number 2. Otherwise, it would be number 1. I do love this so, 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 so much. Unfortunately, my camera overheated right when I was talking about number 1, but I'm going to start over right now and hopefully it survives. But everybody knew this palette was coming. Number 1 is the Adept Cosmetics Original Plain Jane. I'm pretty sure I've said on my Instagram that this palette is coming into the grave with me. I don't think I'm exaggerating. This palette is number 1 because every single shade located in here is one of the top shimmers in my collection. I love all 12 of these. They have reformulated this palette and selected a couple different shades. I do think the revamped palette would serve in my collection well, but I just can't justify spending the money again. This is the most expensive palette I own, so I'm really glad it's number 1. And when I referred to making really good palette purchasing decisions, this was definitely one of them. This has traveled with me. The quality is so good. All of the shimmers are so good. Despite this being all shimmers, I still wanted to rank it number 1. I think that says a lot about it. And really it just speaks to the quality, the range in here, and the fact that I could use this every day. I could use at least one, if not two, of these shimmers in each of my looks every single day and be really happy with it. I think once I do get more use out of this and I start hitting pan on these shades, and maybe once the formula goes off, I might repurchase the original Plain Jane. But this is just a palette I can't get enough of. It has a lot of purples. It has greens and blues, which I reach for a lot, as you can see today. This is just my favorite palette. And now that I have this video filmed, I wanted to thank all of you for watching. If you have any sort of comments about if you own these palettes, if you agree or disagree with my rankings, I actually really want to hear about it. I want to hear why you might disagree and why you may or may not use this palette as much, or if you use a palette more, or if you have also any palette recommendations for me after hearing that. I like interesting color stories. I like depth. I like sparkly shimmers. If you have any sort of recommendations for me, palettes you think I'd like, I would really like to hear it. If you've made it this far, please leave me a comment. I would really appreciate it. I love talking with you guys, and I love anybody who is going to be able to talk geeky eyeshadow palettes with me. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and thank you so much again. Bye.